Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Eneasz Brodsky. This week we have no Steven Zuber due to all his travels and work things, but we have an amazing guest host, which everyone here is probably familiar with. Liam, say hello.
Hello, my name is Liam Nolan, and I am here.
You're mainly here because we are going to be talking about Scott Alexander's post, Twilight of the Edgelords, which I find fascinating. It's very philosophical. I thought you would be like the best person I know of to talk about them because one of the major topics is virtue ethics. And another one of the major topics is basically, are we living through the Terra Ignota timeline right now? And since you did a massive 2-year read-through of the Terra Ignota books, I thought you would be absolutely perfect for this.
Thank God I did that prep. If there's anything I'm ready to talk about, surely it's, consequentialism versus non-consequentialism and also Terra Ignota. Actually, my read of this is that there's a way stronger Kantian or deontological case to be made than a virtue ethics one, but I'm sure we'll get into it.
Before we begin, a couple things about what this is. Twilight of the Edgelords, I did not realize this at first, but this is a post on Astral Codex 10, Scott Alexander's blog, which is for paid readers only. So unfortunately, some of the people here may be left out of what we're talking about. I strongly recommend going and supporting Scott Alexander. His blog is amazing, and this post is absolutely fantastic. We will be pulling out a few snippets here and there, just a few lines, but you'll get some context from us talking.
Yeah, I think it'll be enough.
And also, you are, I would say, a bit of an edgelord, so this is speaking directly to you, Liam.
What? On what grounds?
In the last ethics bowl, not only did you take the virtue ethics stand, but you stood by that all the virtues are based on the 1611 KJV version of the Bible in the original Latin only.
Well, I was quoting Aquinas. What was I supposed to do?
I'm just saying, it's a little bit edgy to take that particular stance.
Maybe a tiny bit. I hadn't thought that through. All right, maybe you got me there.
I realized you were doing a bit of a bit for the purpose of the ethics bowl. I think, as Scott is kind of pointing out in this post, anyone who is really taking a principled stand on something that goes outside of just mainstream populism is thought of as a bit of an edgelord, whether or not they're trying to just say edgy things for the sake of being edgy, right?
Probably. One of the things that I struggled the most with really in reading this was figuring out who is it that he's really talking to. I had a couple of brief conversations with people about this just to prep, so I knew I had my head around the ideas. And that was when I found out that he didn't just mostly mean Jonathan Haidt. And if you don't mostly mean Jonathan Haidt, I think he might have a much better point about assigning blame.
Do you mean mostly Jonathan Haidt as the edgelord?
Yeah, I thought that he was the exact heterodox centrist because he has that whole Heterodox Academy project. And I thought this was quoting that.
Really? Wait, in which part?
I thought it was maybe a tiny bit overblown. But, one of the principles that he seems to really believe in is that we need to sort of increase viewpoint diversity. And so I thought on my initial reading, and I think I've advanced, but my initial reading was that by advocating for more viewpoint diversity, have we made these, I don't want to use too inflammatory a word, hideous and repugnant ideas like palatable to a modern audience, which is a really interesting point. But I think he actually means arguments that were much more directly in line with... I need to step carefully here, because I think a core point I'm going to end up coming back to is that I think a lot of the arguments that were made just aren't what I actually see from the Trump camp.
Oh, definitely not. I think that's part of his complaint here, that the arguments that they made were good arguments and somehow ended up in Trump getting elected because... the populace is dumb and lacking in nuance, maybe? I think of the two major things I pulled out of the essay, that one was the first one and the less interesting one, but also still pretty interesting, and I do absolutely want to spend time on it. What was the quote? If you ever let people talk about how men have a higher grip strength than women, then 5 to 10 years later, America will be taken over by a cadre of frothing tyrant bigots who will try to cancel the Constitution.
I'm not sure that I see as obvious a sort of a causal connection there. We might want to think about blame in kind of two ways. So maybe we have a moral sense of blame and maybe we have more of a causal sense of blame. In this framing, you might be able to say something like, well, boy, it really did turn out that people took these arguments in at least some sense and ran with them is maybe a way to think about it. But the degree to which that was obvious and predictable, I know the essay makes the point at one point, like, well, it was predictable. People predicted it. I don't know that I necessarily agree that that was a credible prediction at the time.
So I think once you start treating people as if they are idiot children that have to be herded and protected from the truth, then they'll more and more tend towards that way of being. If you speak to them openly and honestly and with nuance, and maybe trust them to have a little bit of ability to think and to internalize some nuance.
Well, there's definitely like a degree to which we should probably try to treat people as rational agents who are capable of having thoughts and have a responsibility for their own thoughts.
Yeah. And I think that's something Adraste, the first speaker in this essay, is arguing against a lot, that you can't treat people as if they're responsible for their thoughts, because if you do, then you turn them into frothing hordes.
I'm not convinced that that's actually what happened at all. I think there's a really plausible read of what's going on where the frothing hordes came from a completely different place, and they just landed, I don't know, with some stuff that if you squint, let's be fair, really aggressively can sound like things that people have said and made good arguments for in the past.
Mm-hmm.
One of the points that I didn't like reading, because I had made it like a week before in an unrelated conversation, was that it's really frustrating to have spent like 10 years saying things like, well, hey, we should probably cut all this frivolous government spending. There's like a ton of it. And then turning around and I hear, hey, the government's cutting spending. Amazing. What are they cutting? And it's like, well, they're cutting when people don't die.
Yeah.
That's just not what I meant. And they're not doing it for the reasons I wanted it done. It seems like they're just doing it because they hate foreign people.
Yeah.
Is there a connection here at all?
I think that's a really good point. But couldn't there be some sense where, remember the atheism wars, and there were the very moderate Christians who would say things like, yeah, you just want people to ask, what would Jesus do, when they're wondering whether they should be compassionate or not, because the default model of Jesus is the love everybody hippie guy. And then all us atheists were saying, you're giving cover to the crazy fundamentalist lunatics who want to stone gays by saying, yeah, no, actually Christianity, if you interpret it just right, the way I want you to interpret it, is A-okay. Could not other people say that by our making reasonable arguments that there are differences between people, that we are giving cover to the frothing sexists and racists and whoever else?
I have other objections to the what would Jesus do crowd. I think they're doing bad moral philosophy, and that's maybe more important to me. And there's a degree to which I'd want to say, like, well, but all of the things I've ever said are actually really opposed to the idea that people are different in some of the fundamental ways that certainly the MAGA crowd would want to say people are different. But this sort of seems to commit us to a epistemology where anything that sounds like anything else is equally as valid. If this was math, for example, and you came up with some really good, effective, correct algorithm to like solve a series of problems in a hurry, and I came up with an algorithm that was just guessing, like I would just say a random number now and then. On the odd occasion when we came up with almost the same answer, I think it would be sort of invalid to say, well, then you have both basically thought the same thing.
Right.
And I think similarly, many of the arguments that might have been made by Scott Alexander or the more reasonable centrists, although I definitely think there's a large crowd that for sure, yeah, no, it's the answer is we blame them.
Yeah.
But a lot of those arguments are like, well, you came at this from a completely different angle. You have completely different reason for things you were saying. And frankly, the things that are now being thrown back are like not what you said anyway.
Okay, so I agree with you completely. And I think any reasonable person would, honestly. I guess Adraste, I keep forgetting it's A and B, but Adraste, the A speaker, is saying that, like, oh, actually, yeah, we did make reasonable arguments and we were correct. And yet there are these frothing hordes out there. And since we knew they were out there, should we have just kept quiet and supported anyone who was fighting against the frothing hordes simply because we knew they were there and they were a threat?
I think the way that this was intended to be read was that our A speaker, Adraste, is supposed to seem ultimately right. We're supposed to think that they have the right perspective, and we're supposed to be made somewhat uncomfortable by the ways that we agree intuitively with Barreau.
Oh,
But I think...
I want to make I thought the exact opposite.
Really?
Yes, that Adraste was the person who was like making it sounds on the surface reasonable concessions to reality or something, but the further you get into the essay, the more you're like, oh no, Barreau is just correct, obviously, and how could we have ever been on Adraste's side?
Oh, I had the exact opposite experience. I think ultimately I think our C speaker, Coria, real hero of the piece in the end.
Absolutely.
We'll come back.
We're going to hit that so hard.
But I really thought the authorial intent was that we would agree with Adraste. But I think that there's a better read where we see Adraste as a sort of straightforward criticism of the kind of act utilitarianism that I have come to associate with, to the degree that I can speak on it, sort of rationalist and EA culture at large.
I got to strong agree with you on that particular note, and I think we should probably get into that then. But on the merits of the matter, Barreau just is correct by the end of the essay, right? And is more sympathetic. Barrow's the one who still has a soul when we're all done.
I'm not sure that he is correct. I think Barreau is maybe closer to correct.
That is probably what I meant. Like, no one's 100% correct, except for Coria, of course.
Coria is right about everything. Coria, obviously. It's their whole thing, being correct. I think Barreau is mixing his ethical metaphors in a way that is emotionally satisfying, but maybe not as coherent as I would like it to be. I think Barreau is making what reads to me like maybe a weak deontological case, where he's appealing to the inherent goodness. And I can talk about how we might frame this as like a categorical imperative and get a little bit more into in a bit. But I think he's making sort of a case to what might sound like virtue, but is based on the outcomes, even when he's talking about how, well, but I remained principled, I said the things that I think were true, and so at the end of all this, I still came out a little bit ahead. I think he still feels to me very outcome-focused, as opposed to focused on whether or not what he was doing actually was the right thing. But maybe that's just caving to Adraste's frame a little, if I'm making sense here.
I think you are making sense. And let's go ahead and jump into that. Let's go into the act utilitarianism here, because I think that's kind of what is being said all throughout the piece by Adraste, that we thought we were doing the good thing. We were pointing out the untruths that were being said and the overreaches by the people in power and all the bad things that they were doing and saying, hey, let's have less of this. And then it turns out that the longer term effects of our actions were the consequence that Trump gets in power and destroys the, world, let's say, for now. And everything goes to hell. And so it turns out actually what we were doing was bad all along. It's just an entirely consequentialist view of everything without really any concern for...
You can finish the thought right there, I think. It's an entirely utilitarian read. Well, I think the problem, and I think part of why it works so well as a dialogue, is that in a very real sense, Adraste is right. Adraste was, strictly speaking, doing what a good, well-intentioned, thoughtful act utilitarian probably would have done in this situation. And I know this because if there is anywhere that I trust I can find a good, well-intentioned, thoughtful act utilitarian, it is in rationalist or EA spaces. And I think that's clearly the sort of archetype Adraste is portrayed as. And they thought really hard and came to this conclusion. But I think this is where I ultimately fall out with act utilitarianism. It's almost only useful for us in retrospect when things really count. Adraste only discovered that what she was doing was wrong after all of the hideous consequences came through. Act utilitarians don't care about the goodwill or the good intent. They only care about the consequences. And I guess I'm just necessarily skeptical of an ethical system where you can be the most well-reasoned, thoughtful, well-intentioned person executing on it perfectly. Everyone agrees. And then wake up one morning and, oops, you did it wrong.
And as Barreau points out, the system was doomed to fail anyway, eventually. The expert consensus was pushing things way too far, and they could help prop them up and stick Band-Aids on them for maybe decades even, but eventually it was going to collapse. So no matter what you do, in retrospect, your act was going to be bad, right? Even if you help prop them up, whether you speak against them and say, hey, we should pull back on these things, or if you try to cover up for all the things that they're doing and saying, no, no, it's great actually that we're doing these things to keep the frothing hordes at bay, in the end, the system is going to collapse because it goes too far and you were a bad person regardless.
I don't know if I agree with that. And the essay gestures at it. Maybe there was an exact perfect set of things you could do with the gift of prophecy, right? If we went and we chained Cassandra up in the basement and then just did everything she said, maybe you could have had the perfect sequence of events, the system doesn't fail, and you've managed to be ethically in the clear.
Okay, was that not a reducto ad absurdum right there? Because obviously no one can do that aside from maybe God himself. In which case, why do you even need to balance all the things? You can just impose what you want.
Well, I am not really an act utilitarian. This is an example of why I think it doesn't work, but I think they would have a coherent point to say that is the set of things they should have done.
Any moral theory that says you should be basically infallible and omniscient, you must become God, is not a good moral theory for anybody who is not a god.
Well, it might be correct, though, is the problem. Like, it may not be a useful moral theory, but it might be literally the right one. Like, in the sense of being right, you should. That would be better.
I would agree that if you're God, then you absolutely should. It would be better to have everything be perfect. But that does not apply to a world of non-gods.
If our ultimate bar of ethics, though, ends up being utility in the classic act utilitarian senses, we're just going to add up all the pleasure and subtract the pain and do some multiplicative thing against the number of people experiencing it. If that is our ultimate benchmark for what ethics is, then all theories will tend towards act utilitarianism inevitably. How could they not, right?
Virtue ethics can absolutely have a sort of utilitarianism at its, not even utilitarianism, because I don't like the actual utils of utilitarianism, but a consequentialism at its base, right? Because you want to promote the virtues that have the best consequences in the long term across all of society. So that reduces the consequentialism, even though what you're acting on is the virtues.
So I don't know that that's what a good virtue ethicist would say. Virtue ethics, as I've had it explained to me, and I've read a bit of my classics. I spent a couple of years going through a bunch of Plato. I'm declaring myself qualified to speak on this. Virtue ethics would probably say something more like the thing that it is to be good is to pursue the good and to be a good person. But the way we measure good is not necessarily with the utility.
Yeah.
So you could have a society that has good people, and that would be good, but the way we measure it wouldn't be the utils. It would be the amount of virtue that we've managed to cultivate, especially in the people in that society.
Okay. Yes. That's a more classical form of virtue ethics, where the ones I'm thinking of are more like a very modern hybrid.
Well, let me make a case at you real quick. I think you might like Immanuel Kant.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I know. You will be surprised.
I will.
Deontology has been a whipping pad for rationalists for a really long time, but I think what you're saying sounds a lot like what he would ultimately say.
That's not entirely how I'd measure the good in the world, because as circumstances change, the virtues that are the ones we most want to see in society might change as well. Like, I think in a world before antibiotics and before contraception, maybe sexual chastity was an actual good virtue to have. I'm not sure. I'd have to think about it more, but it's entirely possible. And as technology has changed, that has changed as well. So what we think of as the most important virtues, the best virtues, changes as the consequences of having those virtues spread throughout society changes, which is why I say it, at least in the modern day, in our way of thinking, tends to reduce back to consequentialism of a form, even if, what we're measuring is the virtues and their consequences rather than individual acts.
So would you be comfortable saying that, let's take the contraception. There was a time in the past when the circumstances around us were different, but then things changed. We got better at it. Disease spread is a lot slower. And so we can change the way that we are applying ourselves to this problem. So would I be able to fairly say that there is a consistent underlying principle that we probably should have been following the whole time, and in fact, may have been following then and may be following now.
Yeah.
That isn't different. That's consistent the whole time.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to talk about duty for a second.
I'm a big fan of duty.
Yeah, you're going to like deontology. So rather than thinking about virtues, let's think about duty. And bear with me for a minute. If you think this is getting boring, cut me off and I'll stop.
Sure.
I want to say that there are basically two kinds of, let me go with obligations that I might have. There are hypothetical obligations and categorical obligations. So a hypothetical obligation is something that's premised on some other thing. For example, if I want to not have a lot of like STDs spreading around society, then because I want that, in order to achieve that, I should probably make sure that people have access to effective contraception, disease prevention, education, et cetera, et cetera. If I want coffee, I probably should go and pour myself a cup of coffee. Like we can come up with a whole bunch of hypothetical obligations because of this one. They're all if statements. If A, then B, and I can build this out for a really long time. Fair enough so far?
Are you saying that going to get a coffee is a hypothetical obligation?
If you want to have coffee, then yeah, then you can go and you should go do that, and that's how you would go about getting a coffee. This is something you should do to achieve something, to do another thing. It's because of wanting coffee that you have an obligation to go get it.
I disagree because I don't think the word obligation means if you want something, this is how to get it. Obligation definitely implies something else in the definition of it than just this is a good means to that end.
Okay, well, we can narrow it down a bit into more direct obligation. Like maybe if you want to make sure that people aren't going hungry in your city, then you should go give money to a food bank, volunteer, work at a soup kitchen. For any of a wide number of potential obligations that I think you would agree are obligations, we can probably put them together in something like this way. All I really want to set up here is that there's at least one category of obligation that's conditional on some other fact about the world.
Real quick before we go on, do we both agree, because again, the coffee thing is throwing me, that the purpose of a system of morality isn't just to fulfill desires, it is to allow humans to live together?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
And that is why the coffee thing would not apply, because it has no further impact on how the ability of humans to live with each other resolves.
Fair enough. My intent with the coffee example was more to show that we can spread this concept out across like a wide range of potential hypothetical circumstances, or to help demonstrate like the specific if-then structure of my hypothetical obligations. But I take your point. Deciding you want coffee is not typically what we think of as like deep ethical thought.
Right.
Fair. So anyway, but I have this structure of a type of obligation that's conditional on something else. And that we're on the same page with at this stage.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I have one other kind of obligation that Kant would have called a categorical. And this is a kind of obligation that I have at all times. Not based on any specific thing that I want. He would say that it's based on reason. He was a rationalist in the classic rationalist sense. He thought that ethics was something that you could figure out, and he thought that he had deduced that this was the categorical imperative is the obligation we always have, whatever circumstance we happen to be in. So there is an underlying principle that doesn't necessarily change.
Can I just stop you real quick?
Yeah.
To disagree that there's any one obligation that everyone always has? Like, I think if you are on a desert island and none of your actions can impact other humans in any way, you do not have any obligations ever, because, again, morality deals specifically with allowing humans to live with other humans.
Do you not have obligations to yourself?
Nope.
Why not?
What do you mean, why not?
Well, why not? I'm a human. If I want my principle to be universal, if I want to universalize it, then surely my morals have to apply to myself as well.
If you're the only person, then whatever you decide is already universal.
Okay, so you do support theories of ethics that are like situational ethics.
Yes, all theories of ethics are situational ethics, in my opinion. If we had different biology, then our ethics would be very different.
I'm not convinced of that. Uh,
Okay.
Utilitarianism is pretty clear that the thing you're maximizing for is always the same no matter the situation you're in.
Yeah, I'm not sure I fully am on board with utilitarianism.
Virtue ethics is pretty clear that the thing you should be pursuing is virtue.
We might want to ask why we are pursuing these certain virtues, and I think the answer comes back to, again, so that humans can live with each other and ideally flourish, but even before that, just live with each other on a basic level.
Okay. You know what? The first way that Kant talks about the categorical imperative is this idea of universality, that if ethics is something we can deduce through reason, which he took to be the case and which I'm pretty sympathetic to.
Yeah, I agree with him in that regard, yeah.
Okay, well, if it can be deduced just through reason, then it's really hard to say that it depends on where I am or what I'm doing.
No, it's not. You're always in a context. You use the reason in the context of the universe that you're in.
Reason shouldn't be dependent on my physical location.
What is even the purpose of reasoning here, aside from being better able to exist in the universe?
I don't typically think of reason as being primarily purpose-driven. But like the rules of good thinking are the rules of good thinking, regardless as to where I am. The reason we can do other version of reason, the reason we can do math to do with like numbers of dimensions other than our own is the universalizability of reason itself, right? So reason shouldn't be dependent on facts about what table I'm sitting in front of. Reason generalizes past physics, so it can't be dependent on them.
Sure, we're talking about like getting down to basic logic at this point then, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's mostly what I've been talking about the whole time.
Okay.
Like the application of logic, which I can do in a vacuum.
I think we're getting a little bit further away from this essay and what I was trying to go with. I was not prepared to talk about whether logic is fundamental and pre-physics. So I am going to simply defer to you on this matter and say that is beyond the scope of my thinking right now.
Fine. I accept that some people are not prepared to discuss whether logic is fundamental in pre-physics at all times.
Okay, thank you.
It's one of the many disappointing things about my life.
I'm sorry. Okay, so I think you have once again convinced me that Kant is easily dismissible. He may have very fun arguments that may even stand up under specific scrutiny to adherence to these rules, but I think these particular things have very little to say in the matter of whether bloggers should have spoken for or against the expert consensus of right-thinking people.
Oh, I don't agree at all. I think they have a lot to say about it. I think that the rule I want to universalize when I'm talking about the bloggers, now that I've established that I think there is a fundamental principle which we should always be following, is that you do have an obligation to advocate for what you believe to be the truth as best as you are able. I think this is a general principle under which everyone should operate. And when everyone operates under that principle, that is a world that I do want to live in.
So I agree with where you have ended up, and I think that is because those worlds are better worlds for everybody.
What do you mean better, though? I mean fundamentally consistent beyond physics.
I do not mean that. I mean that the people who are in those societies would judge their lives better than the counterfactual society where that is not the case.
Well, but this is a way harder case to make on virtue grounds. Like, what virtue are we even really practicing?
That's a lot of what this essay is about, right?
Well, but that's my point. They've made it really hard. Kant gave us the answer, and it's super easy.
It may be super easy, but the last 5 minutes where you spoke about Kant, my eyes kind of glazed over, and I would not have called it very easy or interesting to my personal life. There is no way I'm going to be using that to make decisions in my life.
People often don't. They find him a little bit severe.
Okay.
You don't get exceptions with Kant. You're either right or wrong.
It's not even the severity part, although I do think there should be wiggle room for, recognizing that humans are humans and sometimes we make mistakes and we do need some charity and some forgiveness. But regardless, I'm not going to examine the fundamentals of logic and from that come to these conclusions. I'm going to look at societies that have these virtues that they instill in their people and see that they make for better lives for all the people than societies that don't have them.
All right. What virtues? Which ones? I'll buy in.
Well, I think that's kind of what this essay is about. Adraste is saying that we should have been better able to forecast what was happening and jump onto the side that is more correct. Boer is saying, no, we can't do that. What we should do is just speak the truth as we see it, as honestly as we can, with charity, and try to promote the good, regardless of like whether there's frothing hordes and there's expert consensus that's fighting against them, and they both have downsides, and we have to weigh which downside is worse and then throw our weight behind the one that is less worse and hope all these things work out. Like, just say the thing that is true and try to steer the world in a better place is what you should be doing, is Boer's position, and I think it's the correct one.
I think a lot of what Boer says sounds absurd, though.
Okay, like which parts?
So at one point, he says something in effect of like, well, I have such utter faith in the median voter theorem that we don't really need to worry about what the other team is doing. And he's making this case on like utilitarian grounds.
Ooh, I did pull that out. Can I read the exact quote?
Yes. Do you have it up?
I do, yeah. It was one of the things that I pulled. Trust the median voter theorem. The parties must always be equidistant from the average American. If the Democrats are out of touch, the Republicans have free rein to be equally out of touch. If the Democrats moderate, the Republicans must moderate in turn. Do you think that's not correct?
No, I think that's wildly irresponsible. If he's only saying this because he thinks that will hold no matter what, damn the consequences, then Barreau is not a serious thinker.
Okay. I do think it's directionally correct. More and more over the past decades, we've been seeing, look, you have to vote for us because those guys are so much worse. And it's made everything crazy. And you can get away with a lot when the other guys are just like so much worse. Like, okay, the Democrats are going to cut off my pinky, but the Republicans would take my entire left hand. So obviously I'm going to go with just losing my pinky.
Is that really an argument for blindly trusting the median voter theorem?
The median voter theorem argues that if you move back towards the center and be more moderate and be like, you know what, we're not going to take any of your fingers, then people will naturally move away from the Republicans, and the Republicans will have to get closer to the median as well. And I'm sorry, I'm using the Republicans as the bad guys in this case. They move away from the other side, and so the other side would have to moderate in turn.
I guess I have some specific questions about how true that is now that we have structured our lives the way that we have structured our lives. It's not trivially obvious to me that a lot of people are making voting decisions based on having ever read what the parties stand for. See, for example, you pick a day, actually, and you will find an example.
Yeah.
But he's trying to do this in the context of like assigning blame. But again, this is a very consequentialist perspective. And maybe we can say he's doing like rule utilitarianism, which agrees with deontology about everything all the time. But I don't hear him making the case.
It doesn't require crazy mystical thinking, and therefore is better.
Not mystical. It's fine.
Okay.
If you have 600 pages to read Foundation for the Metaphysics of Morals, and then Metaphysics of Morals.
I do not. I will take it on faith that it is not a mystical position for now, for the purpose of this conversation.
I am willing to assert strongly that it is definitely not actually a mystical position. It's just a counterintuitive, logical one.
Okay.
Do you think they have blame? I think there's a pretty obvious line we can draw about who we have to blame.
I mean, I don't think that any of the people speaking in this dialogue, briefly trialogue, have any blame at all. They were both doing the right thing, and Adraste is beating herself up for no particular good reason, which is actually one of the issues I have with EA, is that, or with the almost naive level of act utilitarianism that EAs and rationalists sometimes subscribe to, that leads them to beat themselves up like this. Adraste was doing the right thing and saying like, oh no, it didn't have the consequences that I thought. I'm a bad person is wrong. And I mean, sure, consequences do matter, but like in furtherance of Boer's position, he sort of hints at, I'm not sure, I don't remember if he explicitly says this. If you look at things on consequentialist grounds, right now, Adraste may be right because things are much worse and like, oh no, we should have been for the elite consensus the whole time. But as he says, this was going to crumble eventually anyway. This correction was needed. Give it another 20, 30 years, and it'll have turned out that, oh, actually, Boer was in the right after all because it helped prevent things from getting even worse later on. And moderate sooner. And so, once again, the act utilitarian calculation swings in Boer's favor.
Well, I don't know about that. For one, sometimes empires fall. There's been a few.
Yeah.
For another, I'm not convinced that this is a necessary correction. And I think you're sort of implicitly framing this as, and don't let me sound anti-democracy when I say this, but I think you're framing this as though there's like two sides here that mostly have a point. I don't know that that's true. I think this is maybe not a necessary correction.
I mean, there needed to be some correction 10 years ago, right? And it just went way... I don't even know if it went way too far, because this doesn't feel like it's a correction. It feels like a different faction jumping in to take over when the previous faction finally got their butts kicked out. As he said, think of it as old school prophecy, where the prophet is saying, look, you guys, you're gonna really fuck this thing up if things continue as they're going. And they continued as they're going. And yeah, it turned out things got really fucked up. And the Babylonians came in and took the city because they did not heed the prophet and change their ways in time. It was less of a correction and more of a people in power fell due to their hubris, and now we are all living in the terrible consequences. And the whole time, the bloggers had been trying to say, hey, guys, stop what you're doing, or the Babylonians are going to come in, and everyone's going to be really unhappy about that.
I think there's definitely a chunk of this group that he's talking about where I can give them that credit. And I tried to find...
those are the people that he's writing to and about, right? Like, I mean, obviously, Curtis Yarvin and his ilk want the monarchy, and we're not talking to them. But people like Hanania, who are right now strongly distancing themselves from Republicans and saying, oh my God, you guys, everything is awful. What the hell just happened? Like, those are the people who were fighting the elite consensus because it was bad, but did not want this particular thing to happen.
Yeah, so he was referenced in here. So I looked him up. 100% to blame. What are we doing? Yes. Yes, to blame for Trump. What do you mean?
I did not vote for Kamala. And a lot of people have been saying that, therefore, I am also partly to blame because I should have voted against Trump by voting for Kamala. But any vote for anyone else doesn't count as a vote against Trump, I guess. Do you think that's correct?
In a super direct consequentialist sense, in the way that you laid it out for me minutes ago, kinda. Your actions led to consequences. You knew it was a close race. This is how utilitarianism works.
This is one of the reasons utilitarianism is wrong, though, right?
I don't know. This one feels extremely reasonable to me.
So you agree with Adraste, then?
To some extent. I think Adraste is wrong in some ways and right in some other ways. But in that, like, there are people who are in this sphere who are to... Yes, oh my God, of course.
Well, sure, some, but I don't think people like Scott Alexander are to blame.
No, I don't think Scott Alexander is to blame, unless Scott Alexander did some stuff I'm unaware of. If he wrote an essay that was like, hey guys, vote for Trump though, my opinion changes rapidly. I'm unaware of any such comment he made. Or like Sam Harris has spent, 40 years in a row doing nothing but talking about how terrible Trump is? But he's definitely in the edgy centrist camp. I remember atheism. I cannot in good conscience say that he's necessarily to blame, but like, yeah, if you didn't vote against it or you supported the ideas behind his actual policy or like suggested that that was a thing that was appropriate to do, of course you're to blame.
Huh. Okay. I was not about to vote for the expert consensus that has been doing this shit all this time.
But like straight causal line, I don't know that it's easy to disclaim responsibility for that.
Doesn't that also mean that anybody who argued against the expert consensus is to blame because there were this frothing hordes on the other side and they should have been fighting against them?
No, that's why I thought this was such a fun, interesting ethical dilemma.
So you're allowed to argue against them. You just can't do anything. You still have to support the expert consensus in your actions. So your words don't particularly matter.
I think there's...
Like, why would they listen to your words if they know you're going to vote for them anyway?
We can discuss whether actions were justified. We can discuss whether you were acting based on a good principle. I think there's, for example, 2 or 3 good ways we can argue that what Barreau said was going on is right, is that we have an obligation to defend what we believe is the truth. I personally think that. I reread some of Kant recently, and I forgot how much I liked him. But we can also look at real utilitarianism. We have obligations. It would be better if everyone supported the truth. But I'm skeptical that if your read on this is, well, but then I had to do this other thing, but that doesn't disclaim anything. You're still responsible for the outcomes that you've caused in some sense, if you want to be a consequentialist, you're still responsible for the rule that you attempted to follow if you're a non-consequentialist.
Yeah, so I agree, but I think that the rule was a good rule. Following it did help, I guess, Trump get into power. But if everybody had been following that rule, then A, he wouldn't have been in power, but B, more importantly, we wouldn't have had to choose between the expert consensus of right-thinking people, as Scott calls them in this blog, and Trump. Like, we would have had an actual reasonable side on one of the sides.
Then you got to own that, right? Like, if that's what you want to say, is this was at least correct.
I do think that's what Boer is saying, and I agree with him that, like, yeah, this had bad consequences in that this is the regime we have now, and yet it was still the correct thing to do.
I think there is an obvious line I can draw between making... Well, it's not obvious. If I thought it was obvious, this would be a much less interesting essay. I think there is a line we can draw where we can say making criticism of what we think is ultimately the power structure in society does not necessarily tie us to the worst alternative. So if I lived in a parliamentary system instead of a two-party situation, I think it's entirely reasonable to say I need to be able to criticize the majority, and that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm supporting the alternative. On the other hand, in this case, especially with the most recent round of it, I think it's extremely difficult to say that you couldn't foresee that supporting one particular side of this would have massive negative repercussions.
Neither side was saying that they support at least in this dialogue, neither side was in support of that particular side.
Right. No, yeah.
Criticizing. Okay.
No, I agree. I think I'm still trying to set up to where I want to draw this line.
Okay.
So I'm carving out criticism of the expert consensus. Super reasonable. I also think that there were many elements of that probably shouldn't have been in charge. Cut the bureaucracy. But I also think, morally speaking, that's probably a different action than doing things like supporting a Donald Trump. That's just a different thing.
There are people who would say that not supporting the expert consensus is supporting Donald Trump. People like Droste. Some people who have told me that by not supporting the expert consensus, I did support Donald Trump.
Let me see if I can make some concrete things that I think might count, because I do think this is a difficult line to draw, certainly. Did you or would you support someone saying the expert consensus is bad, you should vote for Donald Trump instead?
The first half of that sentence, yes. The second half of that sentence, no. I also did not forecast Donald Trump being as terrible as he was. I thought it would be closer to his first term where some other people were reining him in. But no, I did not support anyone saying you should vote for Donald Trump.
Okay, well, that's good. That's a start. What about don't vote for Kamala?
I also said that.
That one seems harder, right? Like, just in a... I'm drawing a line between what's happened and what happened because of it.
You're the one who's big on universality here, and if everyone followed the rule that I followed, then both Kamala and Trump would have gotten 0 votes, and we'd have some other third better person in office.
I agree it would be better if there was a... I didn't hate Kamala. Yeah, maybe a little bit. No, I think I blame you a little.
Oh, shit, okay. All right, so I guess I like this essay because whoever you more agree with is the one that you think the essay is arguing in favor of.
Coria?
Well, okay, everyone knows Coria is right, but of the two, Droste and Boer. Okay, so hold on a second. I agree with you about Coria, but Coria is just Boer taken one step further.
I disagree.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. Boer says you should say the truth because it is the truth, and trying to backchain from the consequences as we see them now is silly and wrong, and the ultimate consequences will be better. And Coria doesn't even say the ultimate consequences part. She just says you should say the truth because it's the truth.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. You have a duty to the truth. Yeah.
Okay. So she's just one step further down the chain. Like, Droste is, we should look at the consequences. Boer says, but telling the truth has the best consequences, so you should tell the truth. And Coria is just like, Coria is just like, you should always tell the truth.
I read Boer as aggressively rationalizing, whereas I read Coria as a principled person who is living up to their stated values.
Well, here's what Beauware is saying in defense of Korea, there's something about simple virtue which is self-righting, like a Darumadal. It's stable against a failure in forecasts. And then when Adraste says that actually makes me feel contempt, you're quoting mystical crap at me. He says, I don't think it's a mystical coincidence that virtue is robust to forecasting failures. I think that's the definition of virtue and how things became virtuous in the first place. Isn't he just arguing for Korea's position that, like, saying the truth is a simple virtue and it is self-righting?
He's making maybe a not great rule utilitarian case. Like, ultimately, the reason Barreau thinks that saying the truth is good is that he has decided that eventually it will have the best outcome. But the reasons he says it will have the best outcome don't feel super persuasive to me. And to be clear, despite that last assignment of blame, I do think probably I lean towards Barreau's position on this. But I don't think he's making the strongest case he could make for his position. I am disappointed by Barreau's commitment to a sort of lazy utilitarianism, as opposed to what Korea does only very briefly and is then skipped past, which is to take a stronger case. Like, what Barreau's saying isn't we should say the truth all the time because, yeah, this time, no, definitely it was the worst outcome, 100%. But if I do this 10,000 more times, eventually it'll work out. He seems to be saying that, like, no, it was probably the right call. You know, it's a median voter thing. It'll all balance out eventually if the world economy stabilizes and nothing else bad happens, despite the rate at which bad things have been happening. I read him as somewhat insincere, I guess.
I do think he's saying that, but also I think the primary reason, and maybe this is just me projecting, doing the typical mind fallacy, like I think this, so obviously most humans think this, but the reason we want to promote truth and honesty among people is because it does overall have the best consequences for society. It creates the best societies for everybody to live and to have the best lives. When Korea says, I'm saying you should say true things regardless of the consequences, I realize she's speaking in absolute terms, like always say true things regardless of consequences. Boy, I know I know a lot of people would disagree with that. I know Jennifer would disagree with that. I agree with that statement as it's written, but not for the reason she's saying it.
But then you don't.
Because, well, okay, so that is correct. Yeah, I'm saying you should say, I would always repeat, you should say true things regardless of the consequences. But that's because I think almost everyone, when they say, look at the consequences, they're saying, look at the consequences right now, or chain backwards from current events or whatever, and they end up like Adraste. My point is that the consequences of promoting a love of truth and speaking the truth to everybody are so much better that you ignore local consequences, like maybe somehow not enough people vote for the expert consensus and we get this mess instead. Because ultimately, you can't just say, yeah, always be honest and virtuous, except in this one occasion, and also except in this occasion. And okay, when the experts tell you not to be honest and virtuous, don't do it then. But other than that, always be honest and virtuous, right? Like, no, fuck that. You can't live like that. That just gives you excuses to only be honest whenever you think it's going to benefit you locally in this 5-minute time period. So you say, always say true things regardless of the consequences because of the ultimate long-term consequences. And that's not what she's saying, but I would repeat her sentence for different reasons because I'm talking to humans and not to gods.
Well, we shouldn't talk down to people.
Well,
I guess, sure. Clear, like, rule utilitarian case, we can't possibly sit down and crunch out the numbers on everything that's going to happen every time. But maybe there's a degree to which we have to consider the rules that we've chosen.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's the whole point of the project of ethics, right?
Some people disagree about rules, but yeah, sure, I guess.
Okay.
Always be honest and virtuous sounds fine. Okay, we're going to do virtue ethics. Always be honest and virtuous. What do we actually mean when we say that? Like, how do I know what is the honest thing?
I'm confused by this question. Like,
okay,
you mean in the ultimate sense of the word? Like, I guess no one can ever know for sure.
I mean in a pretty practical sense.
Okay.
Like, how do I know what the honest thing is? Let's say I'm discussing an upcoming election, and I say a bunch of true statements that suggest I believe you should vote for the opposite of the person I truly believe you should vote for. We're back discussing who ran against Adams. Jefferson? I think it was Jefferson. So let's say we're writing for the paper, and I make a bunch of honest statements about Adams, and how he's going to draw more and more power away from the states and towards a centralized federal government. He's like fundamentally too tied in with Hamilton at this time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that all implies a series of true statements that imply I think you should vote Jefferson. But my true belief is that you should not do that. Is that honest?
You said a bunch of true things that helps people update their map of the world, right?
I think I might say that I have been dishonest when I was doing that. I may have pursued a different virtue. I may have pursued like the virtue of truth-telling, but that's not honesty, is it?
I mean, was your goal to correctly convey who you think people should vote for?
No, I was trying to do the opposite by telling the truth. I'm setting up like lies of omission, I guess.
Why? Okay, why would you want to convince people to vote for someone that you don't want them to vote for?
I'm being paid.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess you could do that for money.
Yeah, no, for sure. Definitely there are people who would do that for money.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, it feels...
I didn't
yucky.
lie.
No, it definitely feels yucky to take money to try to convince people of, something you don't personally...
All of the individual sentences I said, I personally believe. I didn't even make an argument. I just said a series of true facts, which when taken in concert...
Yeah, you knew it was an argument. It was going to be used as an argument to vote for Adams. That's why you're getting paid.
Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly seems mercenary in a bad way. Like that would... that is not a virtue I would want to promote.
I would maybe first say, this is why virtues are hard. You need to know what they are. And telling true things doesn't actually get us at like the core of honesty. And frankly, if I can extend this one step further, saying true things that I believe to be true, but maybe leaving out some of the consequences of that implication might also not be honesty, right?
Definitely. Especially if you know that the person would do something different if they knew what all the implications actually are.
Well, then isn't saying don't vote for Kamala, but leaving out the consequences of another Trump presidency dishonest?
If you think that the consequences are going to be what they were, and if you think that, and you don't want those consequences, like if someone legitimately thought that his second term would be roughly as bad as his first term and not, 10 times worse, then the implicit in don't vote for Kamala is that we're going to be in for a bad time. It's going to be like his first term, but, we can survive it.
He did try to do a coup.
We're going to hell. I know. No one should have voted for Trump. I do think, I certainly said don't vote for Trump. I think other people did as well. I'm not sure if I said don't vote for Trump. I said I'm not going to, and it seems like a bad idea.
All right.
Yeah.
Fine. I'll stop poking you on it. But it did seem like a really obvious way to go after the virtue of honesty. I think virtue ethics is hard mostly for that reason. It's difficult to know what virtue is the relevant one in a lot of situations. It's difficult to know what virtue Barreau thinks is relevant. Coria makes a lot of sense to me.
How do you feel about the whole idea in Terra Ignota of delaying a war for, 2 decades that they managed to delay the war?
I think it was more, but at the cost of making it worse, right?
Right. That seems to me a lot of what Beware is saying, that, maybe you could have made the expert consensus limp along for another decade, and then it would have been even worse once it finally collapses. What did you think about what they did in that they delayed the war for some period of time and ended up making it a lot worse with that delay? And knowing that it was probably... Okay, hold on. It's been a while since I read the first 3 books. Did Mycroft... Did he assume that the war could be delayed forever, or did he assume that it would be not as bad once it came?
Have you read the 4th book?
No.
Okay.
I just purchased the first book with the 4th book.
Do read it. You should all go read Terra Ignota. It's very good.
Yeah. There was a 6-year gap between when I read the 3rd book and when the 4th book came out. So I say it's not entirely my fault that I fell out of the series here.
It's long. I'm not blaming. I'm just... noting it's very good. Everyone should go read them. I think the analogy doesn't hold up. So I'm gonna get into context from a book many of you haven't read. There is a theory proposed inside of Terra Ignota that one of the most dangerous situations humans can find themselves in is that there has been too long since the last big war. There's sort of 2 key reasons that this is put forward as the case. One of them is everyone forgets how to fight wars, and it goes extremely, extremely badly when we suddenly get back into it. We all read exclusively what Hannibal did, but then find ourselves in Vietnam, and it just doesn't track. The other is that technology advances, and we end up, again, not understanding how to prosecute a war in a responsible fashion to the extent that that is a thing that can ever be done. But these are two things that are core to the idea that instigating a war now will reduce total war deaths in the future. The utilitarian calculus of doing that immediately instead of later, we want to get this out of the way before instead of after the atomic bomb, just does not, to my eye, hold up in this situation where we had no meaningful analogous progression of political technology except maybe social media, but you have to get on a whole tangent to make that work. And certainly no meaningful maybe a meaningful forgetting how to run a country, but not in the same way. Not necessarily in the same way. So I see what you're getting at, and I think someone I was talking to noted the analogy given with the angel giving us a glimpse of progress to see if we can handle it. Extremely terror ignota.
Well, okay, so hold on. Before we go into like the essay or possibly real world, you thought that it was bad that they delayed the war for 2 decades in the Terra Ignota book? Or 3 decades or however long it was?
No, I think it was good because of reasons that maybe I shouldn't say. You know what?
Oh, okay. It turns out to be good in the 4th book that this got delayed.
If you haven't read Terra Ignota, I've now said enough words about it that you should have skipped ahead by now. Now it's on you. So, no, I've gone over this at length. It was good that they delayed the war because God showed up, and it was fine then.
Okay.
But we can't count on God just showing up to fix all our problems.
Okay. So technically what they did was bad. They just got lucky because God showed up.
Yeah, extreme moral luck.
Yeah.
Like,
okay.
Maybe it would have been fine. The necessity of war is a core theme in Terra Ignota. They super get away with it.
So since we cannot expect God to show up in our world, you just don't think that things would have necessarily kept getting worse and been even worse if we delayed things for another decade?
How so? Like, what's the analogous progression?
I don't know, but I think that is one of the things that Beauware is arguing for, that you could have just kept propping up the powers that be, and they would have just felt that they have license to keep doubling down and going further and further into their antisocial things that they're doing.
Well, I mean, is that...
Like what Adraste is arguing for is not criticizing them, right? She's basically arguing for a censorship regime in order to prop up the powers that be.
I'm not sure that's full-throatedly what Adraste is arguing for. I think there's a way more reasonable read of Adraste, where what Adraste is saying is basically there's all kinds of other truths we could have been telling that are just as legitimate.
No, I don't. I think you're wrong. Because the truths that they're talking about specifically are the truths where they point out that the expert consensus is doing things bad. Like, she could talk about other things. She could talk about, like, you know, the beauty of math or the truths of the biological world, but none of that is what they care about. They care about speaking the truths of these things that the expert consensus is doing is actually harmful.
Okay, so we have a few, I think, that got listed. I can go over them briefly.
Sure.
I think I agree with them to various extents. We should question p-hacked psychology studies, and now we have an anti-vaxxer in the government.
Yeah.
I just don't think this is I fundamentally disagree with the premise that these two things are connected. I do not see the line. We wanted a swift, lean government that stopped strangling innovation and infrastructure. Instead, we got chainsaw-style firings, total devastation of state capacity, and exactly the way most likely to strangle innovation more than ever. And the worst and dumbest people in the world gloating about how they solved the grift of sending life-saving medication to dying babies. Like, is this even related to that first thing?
Okay, so your argument is just that Adraste is wrong.
Yeah, I think Adraste is wrong about a lot.
You don't think it's possible that some of the people that were turned against the elite consensus were turned against it by people pointing out, hey, you know, these guys, they're hacking their studies and you can't trust their science because they're just publishing the things that flatter them and not everything that they find?
If we're doing the hypothetical, which I can absolutely do, then I read Adraste as a failed act utilitarian who is sort of struggling with the weight of an ethical theory that was never able to help them live their life and is only able to help them criticize themselves.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why this is an anti-Droste essay.
But if we're reading the essay, I just don't think some of these make sense as natural conclusions. I am skeptical. So I read some Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
People kept telling me Twitter is where I can go and argue more. And one, may be true. But two, have you read the people on Twitter? Like, these people vote. What happened was not, I guarantee, what happened was not that they read a thoughtful piece on p-hacking in essays and then changed their mind. I am deeply skeptical that a lot of this voter base would understand the concept of p-hacking at all. So what's the line that we're drawing here? The people who we can start to blame are the people who took much more meaningful action towards supporting the Trump campaign.
Yes, but, Droste wants to feel bad about herself. So you don't think that that if everybody who was, in Droste's social circle and writing about these things had instead also covered up p-hacking and said, no, like, the science is right, we should listen to the science, that there would be more 2% more people willing to vote for the expert consensus, and therefore the election would have gone the other way? Like, we're talking about very thin margins in American elections here.
Perhaps I would have been much more confident saying yes like an hour ago.
Oh, okay. How did I ruin everything?
Apparently, you did tell people not to vote for Kamala.
Well, yes.
So maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Like 2%, right? 2% isn't that much.
I almost feel like I have a bit of moral luck in the fact that I have a small audience. The audience I do have is mostly people who are thinking for themselves anyway. I don't think I had any particular sway over the outcome of this election, but I absolutely understand Scott Alexander, who has readership in the hundreds of thousands, and including people literally in power, heads of corporations, people in high levels of government read him. Like, I can see how he could be feeling guilty about this and is trying to walk through it. And I just don't think that criticizing actual bad things by saying true things is bad.
I agree with that. Here's where you've given me some pause. Mm-hmm. It's not that I believe that less. It's that perhaps you have shown me that the line between that and electoral choices is perhaps thinner than I presumed.
Does this mean you have turned into a consequentialist over the last hour and a half? Because now you're worried about the consequences of an election.
Oh, I thought we were just assigning blame.
How are those different?
Blame is always about consequences, right?
Right.
So if we're talking about blame, then I get to play consequentialism.
Yes.
Transparently. It comes for free with the word.
That's why I ask if you've become a consequentialist, because if you were not a consequentialist, you would be saying something like he did the right thing and therefore it was the right thing, even if it did throw the election or slightly nudge the election.
I think the line that I tried to carve out earlier is still the line that I'm landing on. But it's very specific to what exactly did Edgelords actually do? If Edgelords wrote the things that I have read Scott Alexander write, then I think Edgelords is in the clear. They did the right thing. They said things they believed to be the case. They advocated for what they believed to be the truth in the way that they could do it the best. And I don't think they at any point misled people as to the consequences of... I actually don't remember Scott Alexander commenting much on the election at all. Did he?
No, I think I've read everything Scott Alexander has written, or the vast majority of it. So he certainly never told people not to vote for Kamala. Although, as you had pointed out in your Adams-Jefferson example, he did say some things about the expert consensus that Kamala was the head of, making some major fuck-ups and fucking with our lives.
Okay. Scott Alexander, I think you are 100% in the clear.
Oh, yeah. No. I think everyone thinks that. Yes.
I think he's done everything you could do, right? I think you have an obligation to say things you think are true. If there was any ambiguity, then establishing he doesn't support Trump, big step forward. He didn't, to my eye, take any positive action. He didn't follow any rule. In my day-to-day life, I'm a big natural rights guy, but it just doesn't really apply here. I think that's totally fine. But like saying don't vote for Kamala, I'm sorry. It's so
Okay.
there's such a line.
All the writings that, as you said, pointed out true bad things about Kamala, which would maybe make people think, you know what, I'm going to sit out this election instead of voting for Kamala. You don't think that those are the equivalent or something?
In this case, in the case of Scott Alexander, I just don't see it at all in any of the stuff that he's written. I could certainly conceive of someone who wrote things in such a way that I would agree they have basically done that.
Okay.
Maybe I don't read them closely enough. This is somewhat informed, though, by the fact that, again, they just don't feel like they're the same arguments that were actually being made. Like, as I said maybe an hour ago, when I said we needed to cut the government bureaucracy and reduce the budget, I didn't mean randomly slash, like, what, $2 billion in funding and then propose an additional $1 trillion in spending? Like, this isn't even just not what I meant. It's a completely different thing.
Yeah, agreed. This kind of brings me to the place where Boer really won me over. He's saying that, like, the elite consensus sucks and the populist upswelling sucks. The words here is, it doesn't matter which of the two doomed options you choose, and you might as well choose the honest and dignified one. The two choices we were presented with were both bad, so the honest and dignified thing to do is just to say the truth, even if it does mean some people might sit out an election, but things are shitty either way, so keep your soul. If you sold your soul to keep sticking band-aids on it, it would have fallen regardless, and you would be without your soul.
I agree we have an obligation to the truth, because at heart I'm a little bit of a philosophy nerd. I don't think I agree with the framing here that we have these two options.
I think Adraste, in context, is talking about the American election, in which there were, most people say, two options. I somehow managed to find a third option, and yet still, everyone else seems to say that it comes down to these two options. And at least if you're writing publicly, if you are criticizing one of the options, you seem to be drawing vote share away from them.
You could very easily just put in a line at the end that the other one is worse. Like, saying the truth, I don't know that you necessarily get free reign to just wipe your hands of any... Where I think this is losing me.
I agree, but like, if 2 years ago you're talking about p-hacking and p-hacking and DEI initiatives, forcing people to say that, what was it, white people are causing earthquakes? Do you need to say at the end of that, and also Republicans are worse? Like, it just seems like silly, and also not even necessarily right. Like, what if Mitt Romney had run instead of Trump?
I did not think you needed to put that line in at the end.
Right, exactly.
But it seems like Scott Alexander has decided maybe you do.
I mean, if you're using Adraste's retrospective ethics, then you should have done that in there, right? And I argue that Boer is correct in that, no, you didn't need to do that. That would have been silly. And things don't turn bad in retrospect because they had bad consequences if you were following correct virtues.
Oh boy, yeah. Ultimately, I think the answer I have to come down to on this is that, to answer the question, should edgy centrists accept some of the blame for Trump? Yeah, some of them. some, yeah, a little bit. Not necessarily all of it. I don't think this makes the best case for it. And I do lean towards Barreau ultimately. I think that the correct choices were the ones that were about making the best case you can for the things that you believe in the most.
I mean, I do think that's centrally what we're talking about here. We're not talking about the people who actually were supporting Trump. We're talking about the people who just made criticisms of the of the expert consensus without saying at the end, oh, by the way, don't vote for Republicans.
Well, since the question is about blame, some of them still yes.
Okay, how come?
When we're assigning blame, we have to look at who caused a thing to happen. And that's a consequentialist framing. So I got to draw this line back to somewhere. And there's a person at the end of it.
I would blame other people maybe, but certainly not the people who were criticizing the elite consensus, because I think they were doing, regardless of the consequences, regardless of Trump getting elected, I would want people to do that anyway. And blaming somebody for something discourages that virtue from being repeated in the future.
Maybe, I think I might see what we've been talking around here.
Okay.
I think we both agree that criticizing the elite consensus isn't the part that makes you be blamed.
Yes.
I would further say many people who were criticizing the elite consensus transparently have at least some blame, but not because of the criticizing the consensus part.
Right.
Okay.
All right. I'm glad we came to a correct conclusion here.
That
we can tell everybody else.
I don't know that I could show my face in public again if I publicly took a stand against criticizing in general.
Even if it had very good consequences, like not electing Trump.
It's really quite bad that happened.
It is. It is very bad. And yet I want people to continue to be honest. And since they cannot reasonably 2 years prior, or even necessarily a few months prior, predict that would return, that would be the result, I think that I should continue to say they did a good thing.
I hold a higher bar of responsibility on that one. I think it got pretty predictable as we got closer to the end.
Maybe in the final few months.
Sure. I don't want to be too controversial here.
So in this one particular case, you would have disagreed with Korea that they should have said the truth regardless of the consequences.
I think there are plenty of truths that they should have said.
That's weaseling your way out of things, sir.
I barely think it's weaseling.
You're actually saying that they should have shut up about that. That there's lots of other truths you can say, so don't say those particular truths, which is a argument for censorship.
No. Hang on.
Okay,
Slow down.
Okay.
I just think they should have also said other things. The case I'm making here is something much closer to you just keep talking about the truth. There's plenty of them. It's worse if we let people be misled into not understanding the stakes of a decision that they're making, and cheap to just keep saying true things.
I am hearing, though, that Korea is too naive. I'm okay with that. I think that is actually what the vast majority of humans would say. I am a little bit surprised that you came down on that side. Again, I think that's mostly correct, because the reason I'm with Korea isn't because of, some logic thing at the basis of physics or pre-physics even. It's because promoting saying the truth all the time has the best consequences overall over the long run. So if the consequences actually really were really bad, then I would be against this too.
But Korea can't blame.
She could blame people for not saying the truth.
What would that mean? I'm not sure that Korea's model of the world is one wherein the central question is coherent.
The central question of whether or not bloggers should have been criticizing?
Again, a specific set of bloggers. And if we should blame them for what happened. Yeah, I don't know that Korea Korea's position is one that is agnostic to that. Korea's position will only ask, were the things that they said true, not could they have led to a specific thing?
Agreed.
Whereas both Adrasty and Barreau think that they could lead to a specific thing.
I agree 100%. I just had assumed that you were going to be going with Korea regardless. And, in fairness, boy, the consequences really, really suck.
I'm a little surprised also. Yeah, I had a completely... that it turns out Adrasty was maybe literally more right than I thought. It throws a wrench into a core element of my thesis.
Okay.
But yeah, I think you should say true things. You have an obligation to make the best case you can for the things that you believe. Adrasty is not doing great utilitarianism. And despite all the things that I have said in this conversation, I really do still lean towards Barreau.
I am a total Barreau stan 100% of the way. He said the truth, and I think he will be borne out by history in the end.
I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. It would be really cool if that's how this all goes.
Really hoping for a J.E.D. Mason to show up at some point here.
Well, there's the Pope thing, so that's promising.
You think the next Pope is going to have actual mystical powers and can save us?
Could be. I haven't checked up on who's running.
All right. I think we have come to an end. I knew what I was getting into when I asked you on the show, but even so, this is a lot more philosophical heavy than I was expecting.
Truly? This was much less philosophical heavy than I had prepped for.
I'm glad that we managed to hold you back at least a tiny bit.
I have pages of notes about how I can avoid discussing politics at all.
By the way, do you think rule utilitarianism is really that different from virtue ethics?
Oh, yeah.
Because to me, they seem very similar.
No, they're extremely they're extremely different. I think, and you don't believe me about this, I think if someone could sit you down for like a day, I think you may actually be a deontologist and not a virtue ethicist.
That sounds so crazy to me.
But the problem with deontology is you kind of have to give him a minute, and a lot of what he says sounds pretty insane without listening to the build-up. It's kind of a Hobbes situation.
I mean, as a heuristic, if something sounds kind of insane, maybe don't give it an entire day to tack your brain is not the worst thing.
Okay, counterpoint. Immanuel Kant is like a super genius. And when super geniuses say something that sounds insane, you probably should give them a chance.
I will give you that.
Like way, way up there. Absurdly smart man.
I'm still going to go in with my defenses raised because I have an intrinsic level of distrust for people using unintuitive, fancy language to try to alter my behavior.
But so many of your conclusions already align.
Yeah.
But your virtue thing sounds more like duty.
Yeah, I agree. I just think I came to those conclusions for better reasons. Simpler and more easy to explain and to enact in one's life reasons.
Fine, I guess. No, I do think they're very different, though.
Okay.
I've noticed that you seem to be trying to carve out a lane in ethics where we have some space for doing things for ourselves and our family. Before we do things for other people. Is that a fair read?
I would put it actually a little bit stronger than that. Not just like space to do things for our family, but an obligation to do things for our family. Like within reason. You don't have infinite obligations. You certainly don't have obligations to like a family that was shitty and that you'd rather not have had in the first place. But yeah, I do think that people simply pass right by the obligation to give back to the system that allows you to exist as you exist. I think this is most obvious when you talk about immigration. The reason this is personal to me is because I am an immigrant. And technically, I hate saying that I am an immigrant because I was 4 years old when I came here, right? Mm-hmm. My parents are the immigrants. But my life is drastically different because the United States has a system that allows people to excel. The institutions here, the infrastructure that we have, and like not just the physical infrastructure, although that's a huge part of it, but like the social infrastructure. As soon as somebody crosses the border into the United States, their personal ability to create wealth 10x's from almost any country on earth. Mm-hmm. That's not because of anything intrinsic to them. Otherwise, they would have been able to produce that much value in their home country without crossing the border. And so the recognition that a good system caused this, and therefore I think there is an obligation for people, if they find themselves in such a system, to do something to keep it going.
Why? I hate that I have to ask that. Why? It's the worst question in philosophy.
Because if everybody is instilled with such an obligation, the system works better and everything is better for everyone. Like, again, this comes back to my idea that the purpose of morality is to let humans live together and as a bonus to flourish together. And that's just what this does.
Where does Pinker lose you then?
Right now, I'm beefing with the drowned child, Singer. I'm beefing with Singer.
I am coming to a worrying conclusion.
Uh-oh.
That I have prepped for the completely wrong person.
Oh no, who did you prep for?
Pinker, the human progress and altruism guy. Singer is the give away your kidney guy.
Yeah.
Okay. This is going to go nowhere interesting.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I had a whole thing about how we need to build so that we can create a better future. And by restricting ourselves just to our, just to support of our family, we're increasing tribalism. And that's the opposite of all these massive reductions in like violent crime that we've seen. But that's all just exactly what you're talking about anyway.
Yeah. Thank you for doing the work. I'm sorry that it ended up being a waste.
I think I got through most of it.
Okay.
I didn't get through my big pitch on old Emmanuel, but he doesn't have a lot to say about the core question. And if we're actually talking about the core question, then the answer just seems obvious. Some of them are definitely to blame. It's not necessarily because of criticizing the establishment. Although there are certainly like criticisms of the establishment and ways you could do that wherein you might be to blame, but that's not the thing. Itself the action that might cause you to be morally blameworthy.
Yes, yes, yes. The criticism is not the thing that causes you to be blameworthy.
Right.
Yeah, strong agree. And hopefully, I don't know, I want to say obvious, but it feels like there had to be this entire dialogue between Adraste and Boer to really hash out what people think about that, and it still isn't completely hashed out, at least at the end of the essay.
It's a really difficult question, actually. Finding a bright line to draw is really hard, and even if you take like a strongly principled ethical stance, it's tough when you start asking questions about who's to blame for things. It's tough.
Yeah, it kind of hurts to say that, like, this had incredibly bad consequences, and yet, because it was the right thing to do, I would still support people doing it, even retrospectively. They should have done this in the past because it was the right thing to do.
Sure. And again, many of them I also support.
Right. I do still hold to that it was the right thing to do to write these things. And so despite the consequences, I hold that it was good that they did it.
I have to carve out a slightly... I really want to agree with you, but I haven't read everything everyone's ever written. There are things you can write.
Yeah, no, I'm certainly not supporting the people. Certainly not supporting the people who, you know, say some of these things and then end up with, and therefore we should maybe think about whether we want to allow Jews into our universities. I'm just saying, kind of thing.
Yeah, oh, thank you. Yes, I blame them a little bit too. There is a lot of blame to go around. There's those courts.
Yep. I've literally seen people say things like, maybe we should take the vote away from women due to, you know, a chain of arguments that starts with something reasonable that someone on our side might say. And those people absolutely should take some blame for this shit.
The really nice thing about blame is that it's basically an infinite supply. Yeah, no, it's definitely some. It's weird. A lot of people are... I'm going to have a lot of arguments where I explain that really, this is an outlier position of mine.
Liam, I have a question for you, which only the patrons will get the answer to, because I got to do something to get the people that are paying us money some extra content here. We appreciate them.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I think this happened while you were reading Terra Ignota. At least this is when I noticed it. You now have this thing where you only use they, them pronouns for everybody. And astute listeners will have even heard it happening earlier in this episode. It strikes me as a little strange because even people who are obviously one sex and go by the default pronouns for that sex, you're just like, no, I don't care. I'm using they, them for everyone. What is up with that? And was that indeed Terra Ignota that sparked this?
I don't think it's everyone. Actually, I'm not even sure it was Terra Ignota. So I've always been a really big fan of the singular they.
Real quick, I know we were about to wrap up, but like the taking away the vote just kind of reminded me. This specific essay, read in one way in which I choose to read it, at least kind of hints at a lot of the common people are too easily fooled by things and either should not be allowed to read weird, nuanced arguments for hypotheticals, or should not be allowed to vote. Like that voting should be reserved maybe for the people who have the ability to be more epistemologically hygienic and honest. And if we had that, maybe we could have beautiful things again, like poetry that actually rhymes. How do you feel about that? Like, because has mass enfranchisement actually maybe been bad?
I think I have two answers to this. The first one is, I am viscerally horrified that this is even something that has been raised. A government governs by the consent of the people. What are you talking about? This is quitter talk, fundamentally. Oh, boo-hoo, I can't make my case good enough. The dummies will never understand me. Oh my God. Horrified. Yeah. I am flinching in my seat at the idea that somehow the MAGA crowd has a specific, unique brainwave pattern that only responds to things that are wrong. We just need to do a better job. You can't disclaim all responsibility for advocating your own positions because you do a bad job at explaining it to people. And where else do we get the notion of a government from? No. Enfranchise more people and do better rhetoric.
I like it. I'm glad you were here to state that case.
I apologize if I got a little bit shouty.
No, I like it. I like shouty, actually. Shouty is more fun for me.
Oh, good. Great. Yeah. Wild.
Yeah.
No, oh my God. No. Just argue better.
Yeah. We should lower the age of majority, right? Or make it very easy to test into majority so people can start voting at 14 if they can, show that they can understand things.
I really wish I had a clean answer to that. I've thought about that a lot. I want to say yes, and obviously there should just be a test that you can go and you can take.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I don't trust governments to write the test, and who the hell else would? If you write a test that you can take, then all the correct answers are just going to be the ones that keep... Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm too conspiracy-minded. I think that's a genuinely difficult question, and I don't have a good answer for you.
I mean, I think in a high-trust society it would work, and our society has not been that high-trust for a while.
I'm not sure I buy into that framing, but all right.
You think that there's just too much of a power corrupts around that particular test to ever let it come into existence?
I'm really skeptical anytime a government does anything. Some of it has been bad.
Yeah, based on observation, that's for a really good reason.
I'm sure there were no downsides to expanding the power of the executive all those times when we couldn't imagine anyone we disagreed with doing anything with it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it would be good if we had the ability to let more people vote and participate in the civic process. Fundamentally, I still believe in democracy as a country scale argument that people can have. It's like a question of implementation. The implementation is really difficult. And certainly in a public forum, I cannot pretend that I have an obvious answer as to how to maximize that while minimizing any of the associated costs. I don't actually know much about why 18 was chosen. Maybe it was for a bad reason.
I have no idea. I always assumed it was because most people graduate high school around 18.
Well, but look, that's a bad reason.
That is a very bad reason. Also, I don't know if it's historically accurate because schooling has expanded over the years, and maybe 18 was the line before schooling made it all the way out to 18 years old. That was just a background assumption I had.
So many people dropped out when this choice would have been being made, right? So I don't know that necessarily tracks.
When did they decide that the age of majority was 18?
I don't know.
In the Constitution?
That wasn't on my sheet.
Okay. We're getting sidetracked. We've been here for too long. Liam, thank you for joining me. Everybody, check out Liam's podcast where they read interesting philosophical books and then talk about them a lot. What is that podcast called now? Is it still Too Rash, Too Unadvised?
It is still Too Rash, Too Unadvised. We don't want to change any of the letterhead.
That is very fair, and you don't want to confuse people and lose audiences.
Yes, yeah. 2 is the number 2. We talk about other stuff there. It's good. You should listen.
Yes, they talk about quite a few things. Every now and then they have an ethics bowl, which is interesting. And right now they are reading through Citeen by C.J. Sherry.
Yeah, it's really good though. Thumbs up. I wouldn't lie to you about that. I just went over a whole thing about how I don't believe in it.
This is one of the reasons I love talking to you. All right. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the Discord.
All right.
Bye. Steven, welcome back to the show. I guess so. Welcome to the show, since this is the one where you had to sit out due to all the traveling that you're doing.
Yeah. I was actually going to ask what it's about, but frankly, don't tell me. Also, hold on. I didn't learn until Rachel was listening to it. You did like another hour with Wes and Jen.
Yeah,
so I'm looking forward to that. This is great.
It was supposed to be maybe 20 minutes, which then I would boil down to 15 in the post. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, we can do that. We'll chat just a little bit longer and put it in to clear up a few things. And no, it went on for nearly 2 hours. And then that I cut down to an hour and 5 minutes and put it in because I didn't want to have a 3 damned hour podcast. I was like, my God, guys, this was fun, but Jesus, I did not want this much time out of my life for this, but that's what ended up happening.
Well, I think people appreciate it. So
yeah, I think we cleared up a few things, which was nice. And yeah, the people on the Discord at least have been talking about it a lot. It's been 3 days now, and there's still tons of discussion going on about it. Our friend that we know, Mordinamail, posted that this is the perfect scissors statement for him, that he kept going back and forth as to who he agreed with more throughout the entire episode. It was a scissors of him personally down the middle of his psyche. So,
that's delightful.
Yeah. So that was neat. I'm glad it got such a big reaction, and I don't know, maybe it feels almost like bad incentives to have that, because I don't want to be like an engagement farmer or something. But it is neat that people are talking about it.
Yeah, we won't fall to audience capture.
And speaking of like people talking about previous episodes,
Yeah.
there's also people in the Discord still talking about the one that we did before, where we talked about the effective altruism one.
Oh, yes. That came out, I think, right before I went on my trip, so I didn't listen to it yet. Did people like it?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk again in the Discord about my comment that Peter Singer was pulling a fast one on all of us. I went ahead and wrote up a blog post to explicate my feelings on that, and that only prompted people to talk about it even more and disagree with me even more.
Great.
So yeah,
My quick response to Singer pulling a fast one, I think, is that I don't think it's a trick or bad intuition pump. I think it's like, this is how we would all feel. Now let's try and figure out where the line is, and that's something that I think everyone has to draw for themselves, right?
I think it's just a straight up swindle, honestly. It's a moral swindle where he is taking something where everyone has an obvious duty to save the child, and they would be a monster if they didn't go and save a child, wade into a pool to save a child while they ruin their suit, and just say that, oh yeah, and also you're an obvious monster if you don't spend all your money and all your time working to save other people from across the world.
What he's after is, what is the moral distinction between the kid dying in front of you and the kid dying across the planet?
Right, and his point is there isn't one.
I think so, but I want to be clear that, like, I feel like it's not fair to Singer to say that he's calling people a moral monster for failing to do it.
Wait, Steven, if we were walking along and there was a kid in a pool drowning nearby, and for some reason you couldn't get to him, there's some force field between us, like only I can get to him, and I was like, no, my suit's $1,000, dude. I'm not going to ruin my suit to save that kid. You'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's your preference. I understand that.
No,
Okay.
Right. So we're on the same page there.
He's specifically drawing a direct line between these two situations and saying they're the same thing.
I don't think he ever says there is no difference. I think he says that there's not an important moral distinction.
Yes, exactly.
But that's different than saying there's no difference.
I went back and listened to our episode on Eric Howell when he wrote his essay, "Why I'm Not an Effective Altruist." I really actually would like to do a follow-up episode with you on that if we could, because I think I owe Eric a big ol' apology. And I think he's still wrong in a number of ways, but I think he's right in at least one way. And listening to the episode, I was like, man, I was kind of an asshole in this episode. And I understand why. Like, he was attacking our homies, the effective altruists, and the whole FTX meltdown with Sam Bankman-Fried had just happened. Part of the point that he was making was that naive attack utilitarianism is dumb. And we had literally just said a few episodes ago when we were talking about FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried, yeah, naive act utilitarianism is really dumb. This is why FTX ended up the way it did and why Sam Bankman-Fried is bad. This is not how anyone should do utilitarianism. And then we read his Why I'm Not an Effective Altruist, and a lot of it was like, effective altruists do a bunch of naive act utilitarianism, and that's really bad and dumb. And I think we both got a little upset about that.
Oh, but, yeah, I came to you with this one. And I was like incensed, and I don't usually get mad at stuff. And he was on Econ Talk with Russ Roberts, and they were just patting each other on the back about seeing through the veil of how dumb all these arguments for EA were. I'm like, you guys are like making all the dumbest arguments. I shouldn't buy my son a birthday present and throw him a birthday party because I could spend that time and money, working to send money overseas. And it's like, that is not what anyone is saying, doing, or advocating.
Except for Peter Singer.
And not even Peter Singer is saying to do that.
See, that's why I think I owe him an apology, and because I have mixed feelings about this now. I think that he was onto something and maybe didn't phrase it exactly the right way, but to be fair, he phrased it not exactly the right way 2.5, 3 years before I even started seeing that Peter Singer is really fucked up. So I would like to revisit that whole thing.
We will.
And just at the very least say, maybe I shouldn't have been quite as big of a dick as I was in the episode.
I think that it'll be fun to talk about it again. I want to hit the point really quick about like the logical implication of an argument versus what one should actually do. There's the classic example of killing one patient to save 5 by sharing their organs among the 5 dying people, right?
Mhm.
The logical consequence of a naive utilitarian argument says to do that.
Right.
However, no one in real life advocates that we should, and everyone advocates that we shouldn't.
Right.
The issue here isn't that like the philosophy is flawed or that it's got these dumb holes in it. It's that the logical consequence of some of our beliefs about what one should do lead us to weird and unsavory places that we don't want to go to. And that's
Yeah.
perfectly fine and normal and human and appropriate. The person I think of is like Will McCaskill. And he doesn't say, well, we're all a little evil, it's okay. I think he just acknowledges that, no, we all have our comfort level of what we can do, and we all should be doing something if we can. I believe that's like Singer's stance as well. I'm not a staunch utilitarian. The way that I've formulated it in my brain is like, I want our AI gods to be utilitarian in their thinking, but it's not for humans.
Right.
That's not how we work. And so, like, if we are to live as humans can in a way that allows us to flourish, it won't be living moral saint utilitarians, and that's fine.
I think that's a very good reason to reject Singer's argument. I think you're kind of making my case here.
I think it's a good reason to understand that, like, well, I'll give it some more thought. Like, I think that there's still a case to be made here. I think Hermione Granger puts it perfectly at the end of Methods of Rationality, actually. When she's making her vow to Harry at the end, she says something along the lines of like, I promise to do whatever or as much as I can or almost as much as I can. I'm only human as far as doing good. And I think that's kind of the way to do it and the right way to acknowledge it. Like, I'll read your blog post and find a good way to respond to it in full. Because I'm curious to see the full fleshed out version of the argument. I feel like I've heard most of it, but seeing it laid out step by step and getting a chance to ponder it not in real time will equip me better to respond to it. If this was what we're here to talk about, I'll be in it for the long run. But I think let's table this and we'll have this conversation for fun, for real at some point. And it won't just be Singer, and I'll read your blog post. And that way I'll have more context of your argument. Well, even though I wasn't here for the episode, I am still happy to plug the Guild of the Rose.
Oh, hell yes. The Guild of the Rose, we partner with them, and for darned good reason, because this just happened. We've been talking about the Discord a bunch in this episode. A week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, someone came on the Discord, new to the Discord, and was like, hey, I would like to learn how to improve my rationality skills in real life. You guys have a huge backlog of episodes. There's like well over 200 episodes here. Which ones can I listen to help me with this kind of thing? And I replied, well, we kind of don't really do that anymore. And even in the beginning, we didn't really do that much.
And
but
we weren't good at it when we tried.
Yes. I gave a link to like 4 or 5 earlier episodes where it's like, yeah, these talk about some of the techniques of rationality and how you can use them and how we try to implement them. They're older episodes, but we don't really do that now. And if you are looking for that thing, there's actually this awesome place called the Guild of the Rose, which is an online community which literally does exactly what you're asking for. And this is why I love partnering with them, because when someone comes and asks this, instead of being like, hey, I'm sorry, our podcast doesn't cover that, I can be like, hey, Guild of the Rose, they totally cover that.
Yeah, they're doing I don't want to sell us short and say we're doing nothing for raising the sanity waterline. We're a rationalist chat podcast, so we're doing that. They're putting in the work to increase people's skill sets, right?
Yeah.
And occasionally you'll meet people through there that you'll bump into in real life, and it always works out great. So
absolutely.
Yeah, check it out.
It's guildoftheRose.org or link in the show notes.
Yes.
And as long as we're talking about like, hey, we don't have no impact, there was a guy that contacted us a couple of weeks ago through email. And one of the things that he said was that he got into working in AI policy after listening to I think it was episode 202. When we interviewed the guys from the Center for AI Policy, and he was like, oh yeah, I can't really do AI research, but I can do policy work, and then started doing that. So like, I feel really good about us contributing too. We also help
every time,
even if it's in a different way.
No, yeah, for sure. And I wish we got stories like that every day, but it's a few times a year, and like every single any one of those would make me feel like us doing this podcast for going on 10 years, like, or 8, however long it's been, is worth it. The fact that it's had any impact at all just makes it all worth it.
Thank you for letting us know. It makes us feel better.
Yeah, and thanks for getting into doing the work. I mean, like, Eneasz and I aren't doing that.
Right.
So, we espouse that it's a good thing to do, but we don't think it's a moral obligation that one is, tied to doing and is a bad person if they don't do. However, we think
Yeah.
it's morally praiseworthy if you do it. So thank you. You rock.
I do have a couple, hopefully quick announcements.
Go for it.
Okay, the first one is that the Rationalist Trifecta is coming up. At the beginning of June, there is Less Online, which is the whole Less Wrong Rationalist mega unconference that happens at Lighthaven. It's the first weekend of June. I think it starts May 30th.
What I love about it is that it's called Less Online, but I'm so not online that I didn't hear about it until like the second or third one of these.
I don't know. Did you hear about it last year?
Yes.
Then you heard about the very first one.
Well, I think I've heard about it after the fact from you.
Oh, okay.
So, I'm too not online to go to Less Online.
Gotcha. Well, maybe you should be more online.
I guess. So what is the sales pitch for Less Online?
Less Online is an excellent unconference where a whole bunch of rationalists and adjacents get together and talk about things and present things to each other. It's great.
Is there an agenda, or is it like whatever they want?
It's basically whatever they want. There's a few keynote, I think a couple keynote things, which I don't know exactly what they are right now. I haven't looked, but it's mostly people getting together and presenting their ideas and doing a lot of mingling and talking about important ideas in an online space or in an offline space. It's really great.
That does sound like a lot of fun.
I went last year. It was amazing. I'm going again this year. The weekend after that is Manifest. It is run by the Manifold Markets people. It's an online prediction market. This is going to be their third year running it. It is also an unconference. It's kind of like Less Online, except there's less rationalists. There's still a bunch of rationalists, but there's less of those. It's a little more heterodox. I believe Richard Hanania is going to be there. It's definitely more politically spicy and more political in general. It is, again, considered great by everyone I've known who's gone to it. And I will, in fact, be going to that this year because I am going to be living in the Bay Area. So it's going to be right there.
Nice.
And hopefully maybe even get some recording done there, kind of like we did the live at Lighthaven.
Yeah.
When you were there, going to see if I can get a live at Manifest thing going. So if anyone has something interesting that they would like to talk about, get it on mic and out onto the podcast, come to that. And we can put you on mic for a few minutes and talk about it.
Perfect.
And then the weekend after that is Vibe Camp, which is on the East Coast. It's over in Maryland, and we're a bunch of post-rationalists and some various Twitter people from what is called this part of Twitter, Teapot. It's sort of a rationalist, post-rationalist mixed community on Twitter. They all get together and they show up online and they do a bunch of hippie stuff together and mix in some rationalist stuff.
IRL, not online.
Yes, sorry, they show up IRL. Yeah, and they do a bunch of hippie stuff together and rationalist stuff together, and it's sort of a nice camp out vacation. And you went to that last year, right?
I did, and the eclipse before that. And I was sold on it due to our conversation with Brooke here on the show after Vibe Camp 2. And the way that I summarized it in a sentence to people who are just totally out of the loop is it's like not a hippie retreat weekend because it's not just hippie stuff, but it's like nerd hippie retreat.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It's like the most succinct way of putting it, but that doesn't encompass the awesome dance parties and cool events. And so when you think nerd hippie, you don't necessarily think 2 a.m. jam party, right? But there are also those.
Yeah, there's 2 a.m. dance parties. There's building a catapult over the course of a weekend.
Yeah.
There's a hacking workshop. There's a whole bunch of cool stuff.
Yeah. No, it's a really interesting time.
I'll be there as well. So if anybody wants to see me any of those 3 weekends in June, please come up, say hi. I always love chatting with anyone who knows of me.
Awesome.
And then finally, as long as we're doing promotion stuff, Stephen, we have a different feed, which used to house Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality, and still does, actually. But we also use it for analysis of media stuff. Recently, we talked about Cowboy Grack 5, which was a follow-up to, it's a fanfic follow-up to when we talked about Worth the Candle, which was just amazing.
And then Brian and I have been bogarting it for the last few months to talk about Philip K. Dick.
Yep. A few days ago, I talked about the 1990s movie Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with Matt, because he also found that to be a formative movie of his childhood, and they talk about it on the Doofcast every now and then, but they've never actually pulled the trigger on doing an analysis thing. So I was like, Matt, this was as big a part of your childhood as it was of mine. Let's talk about it for an hour, and I'm going to throw that up in a few days.
Oh, good.
And then a couple weeks after that, you and Brian are going to jump in again on one of the first novels that the Rashless claimed as like, dude, this is ratfic. This is we love this book so much. It's Blind Sight, and you guys are going to be analyzing that over the course of, I don't know, several weeks. So that's coming up soon.
Yep. I hope to do it justice. It's awesome that it came out before rationality was really a thing, and it definitely wasn't influenced by that culture, but it retroactively is ratfic. And so I figured going in, like both Brian and I having not read it will be a fun way to do it. So
I'm going to drop a link in the show notes for that feed as well, so people can listen to us doing that thing, or just re-listen to Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality if they want to do that.
And everyone should do that. It's great. All
right, finally, we have somebody to thank for everything that people have heard in the past couple hours.
That's right. And I am jumping the queue on this one. We usually take them in order that they came in, either via Substack or Patreon. But this special shout out goes to Sayuri, who I met in Japan. This was great. We have a longtime listener and supporter, Christopher. I don't know if he wants me to give his last name or not. He heard on the Cowboy Grack 5 episode that I'd be in Japan. And he's like, I don't know if this would be an imposition, but I'm in Tokyo if you want to get together. And
nice.
It worked out that my last 3 days were in Tokyo. It worked out that on the last of those nights, we got to get together for dinner and hang out and for a few hours and walk around and see some sights and stuff. It was awesome. It was definitely the best night of the entire trip. A highlight, easily top 3 moments of the entire trip, if not the best one. Like it was outstanding. And so anyway, Christopher's a supporter, and he's got a couple shout outs on here already, but here's a third one for him and his partner Sayuri. I got to meet. It was just a treat. I loved it. They were both great. Like, we were there for 2 weeks, and by the end of like the last like day 11, we were kind of fried and like just wishing for our own bed and being back at home watching TV, And like this breathed life back into it, and it made the last days, it made them all worth it to stay there. Like if the choice was to stay there for this dinner and evening with Christopher and Sayuri, it would have totally been worth it.
Awesome.
And I'm glad it worked out that way. So it was such a treat. You guys were fucking amazing. I can't thank you enough. And I'm still happy thinking about it. So thank you very much.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you, guys.
And then Sayuri had to go and double down by becoming a Patreon supporter afterwards. So I appreciate that too. I'm feeling the sense of debt that I don't know how to repay. But I feel like I owe those two awesome folks real big. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, thank you for talking with Steven and showing him and Rachel a wonderful evening. And thank you also for the support.
Yes, I don't know what else to say.
In that case, we can say thank you for listening, everybody, and good night.
Sounds great. Yeah, we'll see you back here in a couple weeks.
See you in a few weeks.
Thanks.
Bye.
See ya.